we'll see how it goes. But I think I might make an intentional effort to not mute next week. Thanks, Jay. I want to say hi as we're getting going here to Howie from Food Forest Permaculture. I love watching your videos too. Uh, Food Forest Permaculture, if you haven't subscribed to that channel, is permaculture and then perennials. He goes deep into a lot of different types of perennials that I don't touch. It's just because I have a plant nursery, so I have specific plants that I'm growing. But if you want to learn more about different types of perennials, how those relate with each other, and especially the permaculture, check out that channel. Jay's with us today from Ecology Today, and I appreciate your assistance over the last few months on helping me improve the live experience. Shawnee Gross is also a fellow Minnesotan south of me, growing a very large garden, and it's been exciting to see her garden grow this last season so far. And we also have Michael from down in northern Alabama, and I did see David from Bowtie Life in here. I think he's probably still in there. And then I see well-rooted Caitlin Whalen. I'm gonna give Caitlin a shout out here. It's nice to see you, Caitlin. So I'm just seeing who else is it. Yep, David from Bowtie Life says he's listening but working on countertops. That's fantastic. Okay, so this is a great time to transition to this past week. And since Caitlin's in the chat, I wanted to give Caitlin Whalen a shout out. So I mentioned here the last couple of weeks, I've been reaching out to more and more peers and professionals in my area now. So just to give you a really quick backstory, if you're just joining or you just discovered my live stream for the first time, I started Meg in 2020 as just a reaction to the pandemic, COVID. I was going to school at the time with Oregon State University, so that's my shameless plug for my college. And as a side note, if you ever want to go deep into horticulture or get a degree in horticulture or any type of agriculture science, Oregon State is the only college in the United States that I found, and this might not be true today, but in 2017 when I started my horticulture program, it was the only college that allowed me to pursue a horticulture program online. So completely online. I had no in-person classes. It was fantastic because at the time I had a full-time job and I do have a family. We just bought this acreage in 2019, so I had already had 2 years at Oregon State online. So when we moved out here and COVID started, I was already sort of in the perfect spot to start this plant nursery business because now, unlike our starter home in our last town, which that was a great house at the time our family was growing, it was less than a quarter acre, and it would have been very difficult to do what I do now with having hoop houses, having a shop, have multiple growing areas around the property on less than a quarter acre at the time. And I have a sneaking suspicion my neighbors probably would have thrown a fit if I would have put up a bunch of greenhouses and hoop houses in the backyard. So when COVID came around and I found out about the run on vegetable seeds, there was also a run on perennials. So I think like strawberry plants, blueberry, raspberry plants, apple trees. I was trying to get my hands on some of those when we bought this acreage because I wanted to start. Growing perennial fruit trees and strawberries, but no luck because everybody was sold out, and that was fine. Because what I did was I was always going to do something like what I'm doing right now, but I knew that people who wanted to garden for the first time because there was nothing else to do, we were all cooped up at home that summer. There's probably going to be a couple different outcomes, and I think one of those was going to be they were. I sometimes say rage quit, and I have talked to people that have rage quit gardening because it's not easy. For a lot of you guys who have gardens, you know that there's every year is different. So I appreciate that because it's a definite challenge. But uh, with those challenges, it can be super frustrating, especially when you start getting pests that are causing more damage than benefits. And I know I've expressed my pests and diseases I have here. I know you probably do too. But this is all to say that at this time, I wanted to help uh, people have a successful growing experience. So that's really what Meg's Edible Landscape is. The business that I've built is I'm kind of like that a friend that can come alongside you and help you wherever you're at. Meet you where you're at, find out what type of growing conditions you have, and then help you have a successful growing experience. So, what that looks like is at the very beginning, I sold potted edible plants in grow bags, like this one behind me. I'm gonna move this monitor. I actually have a monitor up on my screen so I could see how much data my live stream's dropping. It's doing significantly better than before. But right behind me, we have a quarter-gallon grow bag, and I've shown these on screen before. But this is a Thai basil plant. So I'm gonna talk more about those basil plants because that was one of the activities I did in for my senior living community this week. But 2020, so when I started the business, started selling those grow bags at farmers markets. And I try to take all the variables out of the growing process. I've talked about this before, but for growing any type of plant that you're trying to grow, there's not a whole lot of things that plant needs. But I was trying to take all the variables that I could take out of the equation. So that meant I was trying to set up the potting soil as good as I could for my customers. Any type of fertilizer, and I love slow release fertilizer. I've talked about that many times, but the plants have slow release fertilizer in them. So for all my customers that purchased the grow bags at the time at the farmers markets, all they literally had to do is find a sunny spot or a partly shady spot if it was a cool season plant, and then add water. That's it. Just sun and water. The plant's going to do itself. And I'm going to show you some pictures here a little bit later about one of my plants that I have for one of my senior living communities that I still sell today. So even though we're in 2026 and I'm not selling at farmers markets anymore, I still do sell these plants in bags. And I, I love grow bags. I'm going to talk more about that another time because I've mentioned them a lot. But this is all to set you up for where I'm at now. So this past year, just to briefly tell you the story again, I got into senior living communities by accident. These grow bags is how I started, but then about 4 years ago at the farmers markets, I had customers asking me to do like a package deal, kind of like I call it now an instant garden or a pop-up garden. So what that means is that I bring a bunch of different plants depending on the year, and I can show you right here on my sales binder is that this is my sales binder I take out to me when I'm wheeling and dealing and trying to sell gardens. But this right here is this is what I've been known for the last 4 years. So if I've never shown you that, this is Meg right here. It's instant garden. I do have those cedar raised beds, and so my customer in town that has the therapy clinic, that's the bed that's there right now. So I've shown that in prior live streams. But that's what I was trying to pitch at a senior living community earlier this year, and I I felt a little embarrassed at the time because their patio where we could have put a garden was under massive renovation. And so I admit, I said I feel a little silly because I came to pitch a garden and we can't really do it because you have all this construction equipment out here. That activities director called a wellness director at that community, asked me if I could come in and do like a 30-minute or 60-minute program. And that was completely new to me. I I didn't have any experience doing any type of speaking like workshops is what they're really asking for, or she was. And so we sat down. She gave me a bunch of ideas. I have briefly mentioned about this. I'll just repeat it again, but she asked me to do some like light education, some sensory, definitely sensory. So all my workshops that I do today, they have kind of common elements to them. So they all have some type of educational element. They all have hands-on. So regardless of the community, there's going to be some hands-on element. And some participants don't want to put their hands on; they'd rather watch, and that's perfectly fine. But they can still smell. So when I bring these herbs around, like the that Thai basil, they can still participate with the sensory experience. So that's how I got into the senior living communities this year. So fast forward to this last week, I've been kind of searching, not not aggressively, but just keeping my ears open, eyes open, radar on for other therapeutic horticulturalists. It's a fancy name that really does exist in the world that are doing something similar to me. So a few months ago, before I actually started working with these senior living communities, I found a website that actually shows or lists out the registered therapeutic horticulturalist. So this is no different than like a licensed nurse or a registered nurse or a doctor, or maybe you could think of the lawyer world where a lawyer's certified through their board. Uh, this this world does exist in the realm of horticulture, and since I didn't have any experience, I reached out to some of these certified horticulturalists here in Minnesota to get feedback on one, if you ever worked in a senior living community, and then two, what was your experience like? And then this is who I am. This is Meg. I'm an edible plant nursery. I'm really looking for feedback or information on how I can bring edible gardening experience to these residents at these senior living communities. So that was a very long way to set this up, but she's in the chat here. So I want to introduce Caitlin Whalen, and she and I had a fantastic chat here earlier this week on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, and uh, it was a great chat because she's doing, and she's OG, so she started doing this years before I did. She's doing the same thing I'm doing, where she's coming in doing these live workshops with senior living communities. And there are others too around the country. So I was super stoked and excited that there was somebody else that actually got into senior living communities, bringing horticulture and therapeutic horticulture to these communities. And that's what we talked about this week, was just kind of sharing notes, uh, seeing what her experiences have been, and she's over in the East Coast of the Philly area. So, of course, the climate's going to be a little bit different than Minnesota, but the experiences that she's bringing to these seniors in these communities is very similar to the ones that I bring, and then the experiences that she's had too with different types of residents, whether that be assisted living, skilled nursing, or memory care, dementia care. So that's really exciting, and I don't want to say too much more about that unless she would like me to, because I asked if she'd like to join me on this live stream at some point in time, which she is today. So, Caitlin, if you would like to put any more information about you, I'm sure everybody on the live stream would love to hear about it. And then I do have her website if you want to find out more about what she's doing. It's wellrootedht.com. I wanted to share that too because she has a lot of photos and information on what she does. And there's some similarities to what I've been doing. There's going to be some differences too that are unique to her. And again, it was a pleasure having that chat with her this week. Just to, one, talk to somebody else that's doing something very similar, and then kind of compare notes on how we've been operating and the whole experience from our standpoint, which there honestly there's not a ton of us doing this, but I'm sure there's more, and I'm going to have more chats with other small business owners that are doing this type of workshop experience with our civil or senior living communities around the country. So anyway, that is that. Okay, So that was how this last week started off. Then after that, I think I mentioned last week or the week before, I'm kind of in the transition for my business. So in years past, before I started working with the senior living communities, I was doing the plant CSA, so those instant gardens, where every month I would bring plants, and then the plants would get swapped out every month. Some plants would stay for multiple months, the long season ones. Those ones that usually dovetail into the gardens in July, so like squash, watermelon, they're going to be there for multiple months. And I always had to deliver them before they get too big to move or too fragile, because some plants like zucchini or even cucumbers, if they're not trellised and like kind of really staked down, they're not so fun to move when they're 5 feet tall. But that's what I did in the past. This year, I followed the same architecture for how the months flow. So May, I did a potting activity. So again, those quarter-gallon grow bags behind me, I brought kits in to all these senior living communities, and we did a potting activity where we potted up plants, and then those residents could either grow them in the room, or a lot of them had patios with raised planter beds. Nice thing about doing workshops, and Caitlin does the same thing with me, is those workshops can be either outside or inside. And that was one of the things I keyed in and I thought really hard about it originally, because when I started meeting with these activities directors, that was one of the questions: is what happens if we have like poor weather, or it's Minnesota, so I mean, really, the first week of May we could have snow. You never know. I've seen it before. So I was always thinking about how do we set this up in a way to where if the weather's not going to be conducive for doing a workshop outside, that we could bring the experience inside. And that's every month when I do the program. It's not weather dependent. It also streamlines my schedule too, because then I don't have to reschedule an event if the weather's not playing nicely. And for some of our communities, just the way the weather patterns have rolled, we've been indoors since May, since I started doing this, just because rain or cold weather or high wind days, or something like that. So I was eyeballing the chats over here. Uh, yeah, so workshops, not weather dependent. I can run them inside or outside. And so for June and July, and then August, I've been following my old architecture for the growing season here in Minnesota. So start off with cool season plants. So that could be anything that could take a frost. So leafy greens. I love kale. I always talk about kale being a super plant because it could take a frost, but it also does okay when we get to the hot, uh, humid days in summer. And then the first flowers that I usually grow here at the nursery are ones like violas, pansies, calendula. So those are the first plants to go out in spring. And then when we roll into June, that's when the cherry tomatoes, or the larger tomato plant, starts come online. Or excuse me, uh, yes, yep, those come into the mix. And then what I did for June this year was a taste of spring. So all the plants that were ready to harvest, strawberries was one. That one went very well. So June bearing strawberries, I incorporated those in the program. And then I can't remember if I shared this. I'm sure I did, but the number one plant here that had the most or the best feedback from these programs was rhubarb. So rhubarb is kind of like the unofficial state vegetable for Minnesota, and I I don't know if I've shared this with you all, and I wanted to share it because this was one of the plants that I saw the largest or the biggest meeting, the biggest impact for a lot of residents in memory care, dementia care. So what I mean about that is that for the residents that join me during these sessions who grew up around rhubarb, either the parents had a rhubarb patch or they grew it themselves, but they're now suffering from some type of dementia-related illness or condition, they they sometimes they haven't seen rhubarb in like 10, 15, 20 years. So just the visual sight of that plant, and it's a live plant, so I'm not cutting the rhubarb stalks and bringing it in. I'm actually bringing the whole rhubarb plant in. And then for that experience in June is these residents actually got a live in real time got to harvest rhubarb. So while they were doing that, I was talking about the rhubarb plants, around rhubarb safety, where we don't eat the leaves, and I'd got into a little bit of the science of that. But from my vantage point, seeing the impact with those residents just harvesting a rhubarb plant, I almost can't even put it in words because the impact that I saw. Uh, but if you do live by a senior living community and you want to help out and you're in Minnesota, I would say, or even anywhere that rhubarb grows, rhubarb is a huge, um, impactful plant for residents, for sensory, and then just that connection with memories. It's fantastic. Strawberries is, I think strawberries. I don't even know if I'd rank them because I put strawberries in the same emotional uh, playing field as rhubarb. It's right there, especially the June bearing plants. But those are two plants that were the highlights for the June experience. July we did the tomato activity where I'd bring the potted tomato plants in, and then residents would help me stake and trellis tomato plants. And then actually I could show you this right now. Then what happened was they got to keep those plants at the community, and I'll show you this one right here because we got to get to this one. There we go. So that's one of my clients, and that's my Little Bites cherry tomato. We'll come back to the other two that I just skipped over, but that's called Little Bites. I think I mentioned it earlier this year when I was talking about the different varieties I grow. And I love that plant because it's a workhorse. I've been growing that plant specifically since I started the plant nursery. Because at the time I was looking for high producing, consistent plants that were dwarf or bush style plants. So Little Bites cherry tomato, at that community, the residents, you see the stakes, they're 3-foot bamboo stakes. They got to stake that plant, and then after they got to take care of it. So that's part of my angle too, is being a plant nursery, I can supply plants like that. We can go through the activity program. I typically leave a sheet for them for like follow-up care, and then all these communities have my contact information too. So if they ever have any issues or questions, they can always reach out to me between the sessions going throughout the month. Um, but that was July. We're now into August, and I'll back up to these two photos because we did a garden refresh. And this is something that I'd love to hear from you. I know a lot of you are avid gardeners. I'm curious, regardless of where you're at, if you're up in Canada or here in Minnesota or maybe down the southern United States, maybe you're on the west or east coast, how do you approach your gardening season? And then specifically, do you use succession planting where, let's say this time of the year, if you have some spring plants, or a good example would be sugar snap peas. They're mostly done by now, or they should be. If they're not done and they're still producing it, I'd love to know the variety. But sugar snap peas is a great example because those are typically done here in Minnesota by the end of June, definitely 4th of July. They're done. And then what I do is I follow those up with beans. It's a very sweet, natural one-to-one handoff from the peas to the beans. And then when we get closer to the fall, I actually switch back to peas again. So in your area, do you do any succession planting? I asked that because this client here that had that cherry tomato plant that I showed you, that's what we did for them this week, where we pulled out all the plants that were finishing up. And so one of the plants that was finishing up was this lettuce right here. So on the right side of that calendula plant, which I was really impressed to see the calendula looking so good. They've been actively picking off the flowers too. So that was that was encouraging to see because they've been on these plants. But the lettuce, you could see it flowered. It's done. We pulled that out, and then they uh, transplanted these basil plants. So that was the very exciting thing about this week is we did succession planting. So spring lettuce came out, the basil went in, And then it wasn't just transplanting basil. And by the way, I had 5 different varieties of basil. I'd love to hear what type of basil you guys grow too. But I had lemon and lime basil because you can't do lemon without lime. And as a side note, lemon basil is my favorite basil to grow. I had Thai basil, which is the one I have right there behind me. I did cinnamon basil, and then I had Italian large or sweet basil. And I'm just peeking over the chats to see. Looks like you guys are talking about snow loads. Shawnee Grows said the Little Bites cherry tomatoes compact, fast-producing patio variety from Renee's garden. Yes, I have mentioned that before. Renee's is company that I get a lot of my seeds from. It's fantastic company for container growing in particular. See, Jay from Ecology Today says, I do a disorganized type of successive sowing and season extension to go further. Fantastic. Michael or Whitebeard says, January I start sowing cool season stuff or start seeds inside to get out by the end of February, beginning of March here in Zone 8. Fantastic. Yeah. So back to this community here. We did basil, but I also, as part of the hour program, we transitioned into fall plants. So I explained that right now Minnesota is a fantastic time, and honestly, we don't have all the time in the world. It's kind of a narrow window, but I love this time of the year, end of July, first week of August, because we still get those longer, hotter days, but okay, Michael says it's after Christmas season. I'm at it. Fantastic. Um, so, but this time of the year in Minnesota is a perfect time to get the fall season plants either started from seed or transition. Tran. Why am I going blank here? Transplant those starts like that basil behind me, and so that's what we did is we transplanted the basil, and then I had already brought sugar snap peas. We also did watermelon radish. So I've heard some other growers talking about watermelon radish. I love watermelon radishes just because it's a very cool experience. In fact, the participants at this activity, I asked them too. I said, "Have you guys grown watermelon radishes?" Nobody has. I said, "You guys are in for an experience." So this time's the time of the year to do it here in Minnesota. They take the better part of 2 months. So, and that's something to explain too about most radishes 20, 28 days, and they're already ready to pull. Watermelon radishes take significantly longer. But if you get them sown right now, you have plenty of time before the really cooler days show up, where you can actually take advantage of that time frame. So we also did a couple other leafy greens. I brought the colors back. So deer tongue was one, and then red fire or new red fire lettuce was the other lettuce that I brought, as well as gangbuster spinach. I love gangbuster spinach. It has the larger spinach leaves. All those plants I actually started here at the nursery before I brought them out to them. They weren't at the like transplant seedling stage. All I did was I used the paper towel method. I have plenty of tubs, and it's not fancy. It's not, no high tech science here. It's just a paper towel in the tub. Throw the seeds in. Make sure it stays wet as soon as they germinate. And that's just something too I mentioned to the participants this week. It's how I actually operate here at the nursery. Is I don't like to redo something that I did in the containers. So with plants like that, like the sugar snap peas or larger plants, I'll or like the spinach, I'll just throw them in a container, wet the paper towel. Once they sprout, then I plant those because there's a lot less rework. And that's something I explained too on the seed packets. I'd show a seed packet And I'm sure you've seen this if you've grown plenty of times, but if you've ever really looked at your seed packets, somewhere in that seed packet, there's probably going to be a percentage with a number, and then it might say germination or GERM period. Uh, there, as I understand it, the seed producers are required to put the germination rate on those seed packets. But because of that, sometimes you'll see like an 85% germination rate, and I don't like to replant if I don't have to. So that's why I like to just get the seed started. Whatever germinates, that goes into the container. If it doesn't germinate, then I just throw it into the compost, which I'm sure many of you do too, right into the compost. Shawnee Gross says, "Short days to maturity are your friend in the north." Amen to that. Amen to that. Michael asks a question: Do you have veggies that are made to produce sooner in colder climates? I got to think about that. I'm sure there are varieties that are bred for that. Man, that's something I don't typically look at if it's specifically bred for a northern climate or a colder climate. There's a couple of things I'm looking at. I'm looking at days to maturity, which I'm sure a lot of you do, and something with the days to maturity also is the germination time. So that's something that took me a few years to figure out because different seed companies have different ways of expressing the same information to us, and I didn't know this at first, but sometimes they'll incorporate it in the days to maturity from when the seed starts, but a lot of them will have the days to maturity after that seed is like at the transplant stage. So that's something, if you didn't know that, that's just a little piece of information that could make your life a little bit harder if let's say the plant takes like 3 weeks to germinate, and if you plant that too late, thinking that 85 days to maturity was actually from the seed start time, then you're going to be weeks behind, and you may not be able to finish that plant. So, um, Michael, that's a fantastic question, and that's something like I said, I don't typically look at that aspect. But I also on different types of plants too. Besides look at the days to maturity, I'm looking at uh, daylight exposure. So for onions in particular, long day onions is what I'm looking for up here. Long day garlic, and that those are some of the variables I'm looking at. So if the plant if I need a long day growth for something, that's what I'm looking at. Days of maturity is the other thing I'm looking at. And then a lot of these plants. Oh, you know what? There is one plant now that my brain had some time to think about this, Michael. Oregon Spring. So Oregon Spring is a slicer tomato that I grow every year. I started growing about 4 or 5 years ago. That's an early producing slicer tomato. So that was bred by University of Oregon, as I understand it, and it's an early maturing slicer tomato bred for colder or cooler climates. So, yes, to answer your question, that is the one plant I can think of that I did seek out that works very well here in Minnesota. So I appreciate that question. I'm curious too, is anybody else growing Oregon Spring tomatoes? So I have a couple other photos here to show you. I think, yep, that's cherry tomato. And then this is the one that I wanted to share with you. So this plant right here, I wanted to include it today because this is really exciting. And this is stuff that I love. I'm getting more requests for this. When I first started working with the senior living communities, I this is one of those aspects or I guess problems I didn't foresee. It's just since I've been working with these communities, I get more and more requests to inspect houseplants. So my first question is, oh, Dave says he has a olive tree. Fantastic. So, David, since you have an olive tree, do you have any tips for growing olives? So what happened with this community is the director asked me if I could take a look at some of their house plants. They just picked up these olive uh, trees at I think it was a grocery store that was Trader Joe's, I think is the name I heard. I don't shop at Trader Joe's, so I honestly don't know what they have. I thought it was like a supermarket, which I think it is, but they might have more than just food and groceries there. But anyway, I was asked while I was on property if I could take a look at some of their houseplants, and that's something I've been getting more requests lately. Is can you take a look at our houseplants? And I absolutely do, and I love to look at houseplants. We don't have a lot of houseplants here, but I will be this this winter because that's the direction I'm going. And I'm also growing a couple of tropical plants like the ginger and turmeric that I've been giving you guys updates on to they're gonna have to come indoors this winter, so I'm definitely gonna be increasing my knowledge on indoor house plants. So that plant right there, that olive tree. Oh, okay. So Jay from Ecology was is asking, is that the place that had the weird light that was less than 10% of what indoor plants need? No, this is a different community. So that's a great question, but this is a different community that has this one. They don't have any indoor growing systems, but they might be going that direction this fall, because we're still. I think I could comfortably say we're past the honeymoon stage, so I have a pretty good idea what their residents like. Uh, but this was the first time I heard about their olive trees because they just picked them up. So I was requested to look at them and then offer any suggestions on the olive tree. So I haven't grown any olive trees, but I'm going to tell you what I told them. Because regardless of what the plant is, all plants need some common things. Some plants need some more TLC and some babying and lots more love and encouragement. But one thing I do need or know is that all plants need water. So that's one of the first things. So I checked the water. I was also explaining this to the director here about the water. So that plant that I'm showing you the tag on has more than enough water in the potting soil. In fact, I recommended like it doesn't need any water for a while because it has plenty of water. In fact, I had mentioned about you can let the top layer inch or so of the potting soil dry out before you add any more because we don't want to drown the plant, which is always a possibility with house plants because they're not going to respirate as much as if they would be outside in the harsher conditions with the increased wind speed, which water will evaporate faster or uh, move through a plant's vascular system faster. And then it's room temperature, so the plant's not as stressed. It's just not going to move as much water through the plant. So that's one thing, the water, and then the light. So I had suggested a southern facing window. I was trying to figure out in the building like which window this was. I figured out after I snapped these pictures. I just pulled up Google Maps and I was trying to figure. And sometimes I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes I get like turned around in these buildings depending on how they're laid out. Especially if I get in the elevator and then I get off and then I have to go down a corridor or whatever. Sometimes I get turned around. But this one was an east facing window. And then across from the room, they have a west facing window. And so I suggested try to find a south facing window if you can. If not, it's not the end of the world. But I think going forward, when we get into the late fall, we're probably gonna have to put some supplemental light on this because unless they have a south-facing window that I don't know of, I I don't know that plant's probably not gonna do so well over winter. Okay, this is what I was waiting for. Uh, Bowtie Life says mine is not much bigger than yours. In fact, I think it was the exact same label. Interesting. It leafed out but recently fell between tables and it's been rescued. Okay, it also says that plant's been on the north side of the house getting hardened off. I'll be putting it in a bigger pot with plenty of perlite for excellent drainage. It's moving into a few hours of sun today. Okay, fantastic. And then, Dave, I'm curious too. Do you use any type of specific potting mix with that? From the research I was doing, some of the suggestions was talk about using a cactus setup or something like that for the potting soil. So I'm curious to know what type of potting soil you use. Shawnee says builds indoor grow room for future trees. That's what. So I think when we roll around to Christmas and to New Year, I'm gonna have quite a few house plants here inside. So it's gonna it's gonna be interesting. Okay. So anyway, so water was one thing I suggested. Light was the other one. And then something that's common to all plants that they need is the temperature, the required temperature for whatever that plant is. So they're at room temperature. That plant's just going to be fine. They don't have to worry about frost coming because the plant's going to be living indoors. But we want to set the plant up for success being indoors. Okay, so Dave says a potting mix, little of this, little of that, until it looks, feels, and tastes right. I love that. That's fantastic. All right. Fantastic. Okay. So that was a little bit of the fun I had this week. Something else too was I'm kind of in a transition where we're getting into the second half of my growing season here. So we still have the rest of August, September, and October. August is all going to be the basil, and then I wanted to show you something else here too. If you've never taken basil cuttings before, this is something I showed or I had during these workshops this week. So these basil plants right here were cut from those plants right there. So these are the children of the parents. That's not actually correct because these are clones. And I explained that without going too far into it about how clones work or taking cuttings. But you can see, this is a good angle. You can start to see the roots coming out of the bottom of the trays. And I think I've shared these before, but these are wind strip trays. So these are all cuttings from those basil plants. I cut them about 8 days ago, 9 days ago, so just over a week. And they already have roots down at the bottom of these little cells. And this was a fun activity this week just to show the relationship of you don't always have to start plants from seeds. You can actually take cuttings from the plants and then root them. They'll do their thing, they'll put roots down. And I briefly talked about some of the cool parts of genetics and how genetics work in the plants. And just the very basic level, this is something that blew my mind when I started learning it. But like that basil plant right there, each cell of that basil plant has all the DNA blueprint for the plant, which is why we can cut off the top of that plant, root it, and then or I should say, stick it in some soil, and then it'll put roots down and it'll grow a brand new plant. I briefly discussed too about the difference between doing that, where we're cloning the plant basically, so it's going to have the same genetic makeup because it's the same plant, versus if we let this flower produce seed and then plant the seed, it's now going to have different genetic makeup because throwback to biology, if you guys like your biology, when you start talking about meiosis and mitosis, we get into that where you have the genetic kind of like the magic 8 ball where you shake and you'll get different results from that sexual reproduction. Jay says, thanks for saying root several times. It tickles my ears pleasantly. That's fantastic. But anyway, so I'm thinking about the rest of this growing season, and then I am actively planning over winter, and I don't 100% know what that's going to look like yet. I'm getting feedback from a lot of the activities directors or the clients I work with to see what they'd be interested, and then see what makes sense for that season. So one of the things that I've been working really hard on this week. Some of the communication I've had with other vendors is a popcorn activity, and I don't think I've mentioned this yet. I want to briefly tell you about it. But I'm planning a popcorn activity because one, just the novelty of popcorn alone is fantastic. I mean, everybody knows what popcorn is. Everybody has their emotional relations to that on when they eat popcorn or uh, popcorn in general, but not everybody knows where popcorn comes from, which that's my favorite part is the education part of this. And then I'm actually bringing popcorn plants into these communities here in Minnesota to find out who are the popcorn experts. And what I really want to do is bring those experts onto this live stream so I can share that knowledge with you guys, or at least have a conversation with them to where I can share this with you anyway. And going forward, that's what I really want to bring to this live stream is um, I've been doing this for 7 years at a quasi, but now full professional level. But there are growers here in Minnesota that are like super niche. They are very good at one or two things, and I intend to reach out to them to basically bring that knowledge because oh man, when I talk to somebody that's had like decades of experience of growing like strawberries or blueberries, it is fantastic. Time goes by very quickly at that point because I have so many questions. I'm sure you do too, but that's what I want to go forward is bringing the expertise from the grower level. So not so much the gardener, but the professional grower is what I want to share with you at some point in time. Oh, so last thing here, Shani's saying for ideas, winter indoors, forest bulbs. Thank you. Plant prop, amaryllis. Okay. And then Dave from Bowtie is sharing there's no GMO corn that will actually pop. Okay. So Jay, I appreciate that. 1 hour, 2 minutes, two buffers. That's fantastic. That's significantly better than what I've had even last week. So I appreciate that. Yeah, let me know because we're gonna wind down here. um, but yeah, I need to know if this buffered much for you. Let me know in the chat. I'm gonna review it after we get done here. But so anyway, just to recap, this last week and for the month of August with my clients, we're doing Refresh for Gardens. I'm actively getting ready for the end of this growing season that goes up to October, and then I'm also planning for overwinter horticulture hands-on programs. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And then the highlight, which I intend to talk about this here in a week or two, is in October, the first week of October, I was actually tipped off by an activity director telling me that there's a statewide conference that I'm going to be a vendor at. So imagine the first week of October, big conference or a convention hall, and I'm going to be surrounded by plants. So I'm going to tell you more about that next week because I have a very tall order. I basically have to make sure that my strawberry plants or rhubarb, some of my other fruiting plants are actually looking really, really good first week of October. So here in Minnesota, everybody's gardens are pretty much going to be done. I'm going to have an actively growing garden on display at a convention for activities directors. So it's going to be very exciting. But thank you again for sharing your time with me this morning. I appreciate the feedback about the buffering. I look forward to growing with you in the future and have a wonderful week. And I'll see you next Saturday.